Hey, I'm Don Schrum with Songs Still Stuck in My Head, a celebration of album anniversaries. Today we begin 50 years on, a golden anniversary for this. I remember the first time I heard this album, Chicago 2. I was playing pool with my friend Steve at his house. It must have been a year or two later. I was in junior high. All right.
Children play in the park.
Chicago 1 had been called Chicago Transit Authority, and then they got in legal trouble with the Chicago Transit Authority and so resorted to simply numbering their albums. They're on 35 by now. Chicago, second only, I guess, to the Beach Boys in terms of most important pop rock group of the 60s and 70s. Much more long-lasting and enduring. The most enduring American band of all. Chicago 2 was the first time they used their famous logo, the kind of Coca-Cola font, and that gorgeous metal plate with just their name on it, just Chicago. They were initially compared a lot to Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Tower of Power, Earth, Wind, and Fire. These groups used varying degrees of pop and soul, horns usually as a background. What Chicago had differently going for them was James Pankow. For Pankow, the horns aren't just a background emphasis, they're a melody line in themselves. He's the trombone player. And of course, maybe you heard this on the radio a few times. Iconic. Reminds me of Rolling Stones' Satisfaction or Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water, in terms of a guitar line that defined an entire generation. Chicago 2 has some truly beautiful music, jazz-influenced, long solos, very creative, experimental. Later on side 3 and 4, some things that might sound a little dated by now, 50 years on. But for simple beauty, experimentation, admirable. I still come back to this album again and again and marvel at its colors. This is called Fancy Colors. My favorite part. Beautiful. Like a sun rising. And we're off and running. Chicago 1, 2, and 3 were all double record sets. In the space of about a year and a half then, they made 6 albums worth of music. Think about that. From, April of 69 through January of 70 and January of 71. January of 71 is actually Chicago 3. I'm a little late making this episode, getting started with celebrating album anniversaries. 6 albums worth of music in the space of about a year and a half. Chicago 4 was 4 albums. It was live, only a little bit of new material. And then by the time Chicago 5 and 6 came along, they resorted to single albums again before Chicago 7. In my mind, and I can hardly wait to get here in a few more years, in my mind, Chicago at its best. Chicago 2 won the Grammy for Album of the Year. And won, of course, for this song, a top 10 record. And again, for this, this is the start of a song cycle called Ballet for a Girl in Buchanan. This would have been recorded only a year after side 2 of Abbey Road and Paul McCartney sewing his songs together. And so do we have a, in many ways, more developed arrangement of a 12-minute song cycle. Terry Kath.
Children play
What a voice.
in the park. They don't know I'm alone.
Chicago had the novelty of having 3 lead singers. Robert Lamb has a smoother baritone voice. Peter Cetera has a gorgeous light tenor voice. Peter Cetera would color many of their greater hits later on. And once, a handful of years later, when he sang If You Leave Me Now, it changed everything. And Chicago went from being the biggest band in the States to being one of the biggest bands in the world. And by their own account, everything changed for them, and they resorted much more to pop music. Initially, Terry Kath carried much of the singing as well.
Living life is just a game.
Every junior high and senior high dance, not that I went to many of those, every slow dance was this Color My World. What a strange and different song. First off, not many songs in 6/8 or 3/4, however you want to think about it, that's a waltz whose structure is not verse and chorus. It's 3 straight verses, 1 instrumental verse all the way through before we get to Terry Kath singing.
Time goes on.
Little Hammond in the background. Beautiful.
Just what you mean.
I think the secret is Terry has a bit of a rough voice. It's a rock and roll voice, which makes the song not saccharine sweet.
Now that you're near.
And of course, it just goes through this on the second time through before Walter Parazader's flute solo to finish. No bridge, no chorus, verse, verse, verse. Very different. Nothing else like it. Still a wonderful love song.
With hope of loving you.
Of course, we're going to end with a jazz chord stacking up. 5ths, 11ths, 13ths. There's some piano. Wow, Chicago doing a different thing. Listen to this guitar. You're well served to listen to all of Chicago's early works just for Terry Kath's guitar playing. Oh man, glorious. Some of the greatest guitar playing of our time. Terry Kath may be the greatest electric guitar player, period. Not my words, Jimi Hendrix words. And of course, that great song ends with the great color of the horns. Dissonance. Holy cow, I still hear that chord in my head all the time. Chicago, too. Well worth turning back the clock a bit and still celebrating music that really still matters. That's all for this episode. Thanks for watching.